Hey guys, welcome back to Jess and Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm going to be doing another weekly wrap-up and wrapping up all the books that I read for this past week. I'm really excited because I have some interesting books to talk about, especially this first one. The first one is The Protector by Elin Peer. I believe I'm saying her name right. I'm pronouncing it like the audiobook pronounced it. And this was recommended by the Book Refuge, Jen from the Book Refuge, and it's an interesting concept. I think this would be considered sci-fi. It's like 1,000 years into the future. What if there was this huge war that happened on Earth, and then the end result was that women now rule the world, and there are much fewer men in the world than there are women. There's no more countries. Everyone speaks just one universal language, and it's almost like a utopia-like setting. Hypermasculinity is basically, I don't want to say it's outlawed, but it's looked down upon. It's frowned upon. There are a group of men, though, that kind of keep the old ways, and they cherish hypermasculine traits, and they are to the north, like in North America, in the Canada region, and they're called the Northmen or Inmen. It's actually forbidden to talk about Inmen in the rest of the world, in the motherlands. And our heroine is Christina. She is a professor, and I really love the opening scene because it sets it up all so well. She actually teaches a course on Inmen, and it's very popular because it's like this taboo subject. Everybody wants to be in on this course because they want to see pictures of the Inmen. It's like crazy to think about men with like beards and like scruffy, scraggly beards, because the men who do live in the motherlands, which I think women outnumber men like 14-1. They're more like soft-spoken. They prize like beauty. They get their hair like permanently removed, like their facial hair and stuff like that. So to think about like a man with like hyper masculine traits is like kind of crazy for them. Well, Christina also, she's an archaeologist, and this is why she likes to study. She likes the history of things, and she wants to discover more about Inmen, and there's an opportunity that presents itself for her to actually go to the Northlands. And it's really funny because wires are crossed, and the leader of the Northmen thinks that the Motherlands are sending an archaeologist whose name is Chris, not Christina, because the message was a little crackly. So when she shows up there, everyone's like, you're a woman. What's crazy about these two opposing sides is that the Motherlands cherish love and empathy almost to like a fault, and then the Inmen cherish masculine brutality to a fault. So they're like on totally opposite sides of the spectrum. And here's Christina trying to unearth this recently discovered library with some forbidden texts, including romance novels in there, and the Inmen don't know what to do because it's like women are so rare that they're like, someone's gonna want to marry her. And she needs to be assigned a protector. Originally, Boulder was assigned to guard they called them momsy boys, like the men that live in the Motherlands, to protect the momsy boys, make sure he didn't get hurt. And now he's like, but this is a woman. What am I going to do with her? And I really like the relationship that develops between Boulder and Christina because they get on each other's nerves so bad, but she's also kind of curious about sex and intimacy because in the Motherlands, you can choose to have sex if you want, but they think it's more hygienic to have sex with sex robots. And you could even like pick your penis size for a sex robot for women. And men are also, in the Northlands, they also use sex robots as well. So like when presented with the opportunity to get married and have a wife, it's like very rare. And so having this new female in the Northlands is very rare. Their romance is very interesting. It's lots of culture clash, lots of like very cliche things about femininity and masculinity, and it's an interesting concept. I would say they lean into kind of gender norms and they play around with stuff like that. And it's interesting. It was interesting to me. I thought it was very fascinating. I'm going to give this book 4 stars because I think it sets up the series really well. I think some things could have been tightened up, but I was fascinated. I was like, I binged this audiobook on any play. It was awesome. Next, I read The Rebel. I just got these books in the mail a couple days ago, and these books are so beautiful. These are by Sophie Lark, and they're her spin-off series from her Brutal Birthrights, and this is called the Kingmaker series. And I already reviewed The Heir last week, and I picked up The Rebel. This was so good. The second book is between Miles Griffin and his heroine. I was like, I didn't know what to think about Zoe at first. Sophie is in an arranged marriage with this horrible dude, absolutely horrible. He's sadistic, and she's trying to delay her wedding day as much as possible, and she made a deal with her dad saying that I don't want to marry him until, what's his name, Rocco? I totally forgot what his name is. Yes, his name is Rocco. I don't want to marry Rocco until after I graduate college. Well, her father was like, you can go to college, but you have to go to the Kingmakers College. And the Kingmakers College is kind of like a brutal world. Like I said in the air, it is hard and fast rules of if you hurt somebody, then you also will face repercussions. And if somebody dies or if you kill somebody, then you forfeit your own life. Unlike the air, I feel like the Rebel really handles the aspects of like the school, like the events and just things that go on. I think it was better. And maybe it was because it was already established, and so we were returning to the Kingmaker College in Croatia again, and I was like, it's all familiar. But the relationship between Zoe and Miles is unfamiliar. Miles is trying to become a self-made man as much as somebody who comes from a mafia family who is extremely rich can be self-made man, and he's very savvy in business, and he loves to bring contraband to the island, and that's how he's been making his money. Illegal to like bring cell phones and electronics and all kinds of stuff to the island, but he gets it done, and that's how he's building up his like empire. And his plans are to like move to California. He doesn't want to stay in Chicago. He wants to be his own thing. He doesn't want to stay in his family's mafia business, political business as well, because his father is in politics. But Zoe was never on his radar until this one moment when Miles kind of stands up for Zoe, and it's almost like a switch is flipped, and he's just like, never really noticed Zoe before, but she's very interesting to me. We also get the third point of view, and I think that in every book there's going to be a third point of view at this point. And her little sister Kat. I love having Kat's point of view, which is weird to say because I normally don't like multiple points of views beyond the hero and the heroine of the story, but it just works in this instance. And I won't go into detail about like what Kat's story arc is in this book. I really just want to focus on the romance between Zoe and Miles. And the thing is, Miles knows that pursuing Zoe means that he's putting himself in the line of fire with Rocco. Rocco is basically a huge bully in the school, and Miles would rather make business deals and make friends than make enemies because it's not good for business, but something about Zoe makes it worth it and pursue a relationship with Zoe even though she's engaged to be married to Rocco. And in the mafia, these contract marriages, like you really can't get out of it. And so it's like, how are they going to be together? I love their romance so much. It was so beautiful. It was so well done. There was a scene in this book that I was like, oh my God. Stuff happens, and I'm very vague because I really can't get into it, but yeah, it was a wild ride. I kind of teared up at one point, and I'm so beyond excited for the next book in the series, The Bully. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. You definitely know who the pairing is gonna be. And it's wonderful. And I'm so excited that we actually are going to be doing a live show with Sophie, Lark, Jen, and Tiffany, and I are going to be doing an interview on YouTube with Sophie Lark. What is the day? So it's going to be on June 19th at 7 Central Time. Okay, just one more time looking at this beautiful cover. I love it. Her covers are great. Oh, 5 stars for the Rebel. The next book that I read was The Swedish Oblivion by Danielle Laurie, and this is the first book in the Made Men series. I've been meaning to pick up this book for the longest time. I bought this book months and months ago, and I finally did pick up the first one. So this is another mafia romance, and this setup is 2 different Italian mafia families, and they're going to be joined in marriage. Arranged marriage is a very common trope in mafia romances. The heroine is Elena, and her younger sister is engaged to be married to this guy who has a bad reputation. His name's Nicholas, but everyone calls him Nico. And even though Elena's the oldest daughter, Nicholas Russo is engaged to be married to the younger daughter because Elena has this past. And it's hinted at that it's not hinted at, it's stated that she's kind of like soiled goods. That 6 months ago something happened, that she had like a lover and like he's dead, and she feels extreme guilt about this situation, about the man that she got killed because she slept with him, and virginity is this prized thing in the mafia world. But the romance is between Elena and Nico, so it's kind of like I'm engaged to be married to the wrong sister type of trope. But one thing that I definitely want to make clear is that the younger sister does not even want to marry Nico. She's in love with like the gardener. So it's not like Elena's going behind her sister's back and betraying her or anything. I was pretty satisfied with all that. There wasn't any like angsty backstabbing, sibling backstabbingness going on or anything. I will say I did not enjoy this romance. I'm gonna give this book 3 stars because I had quite a few issues with this romance. A lot of it centered on Elena. I liked Nico's character. He was definitely a character that was like, I know what I want and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get it. And Elena becomes that something that he wants, and he's gonna do whatever it takes to get Elena. And Elena's also having these feelings about Nico. She knows that she shouldn't be having these feelings about her future brother-in-law, but she can't help but flirt with him. She can't help but put herself in his way so that they can talk to each other. But I really don't like the way that Elena was written. She was probably my least favorite heroine besides Arya from the Born in Blood series by Cora Riley in a mafia romance that I've read ever. She was just too contradictory. Elena and Nico had this thing where she would be like, oh my God, that's inappropriate to say to me. He would say like, oh, is this how you act with like your friends? You call this like platonic? Like, yes, what I'm doing right now, this is platonic. It's not sexual at all. And of course he's being sarcastic. There's these situations that they're in. They're flirting with each other and she's like, oh no, this is inappropriate. And he's like, no, this is completely platonic. You said that you kissed that guy over there and he's just your friend, because she was trying to not get him killed. It's a whole thing. The point being is Elena frustrates me as a character because she gets annoyed with Nico for treating her like a certain way or asking her like, are you a tease, when she deliberately, knowingly does certain things and then gets mad at him for reacting the way that she is encouraging him to react. So I didn't enjoy that aspect at all. And I felt like it wasn't until the 70% mark where I felt like they actually started talking to each other, and I felt like they started getting to know each other. 70% into the book. At the halfway mark, I was like, why don't these characters, nothing has happened in this book. Nothing has happened besides little bitty scenes of Elena and Nico like being at the same party and kind of having a moment where they're flirty and she's like reflecting back on her feelings of guilt for this man that she got killed 6 months ago and yada, yada, yada. And it wasn't an enjoyable read. They barely got on the same page by the final chapter of this book. And there's just a lot of misunderstandings, and I felt like they really could have talked to each other. And there were so many scenes where I'm just like, it would be so easy for you to just say something and you choose not to. You choose to keep it bottled up and they react in a way that puts you in danger or makes a mess of things where people are like pointing guns at each other because nobody's talking to each other. So it was just frustrating. It was a very frustrating read for me. I still am going to continue with the series, but the Swedish Oblivion didn't do a thing for me. And if people weren't encouraging me to read this series, I might not read the second book, but I've heard better things about books 2 and books 3, so I will be reading those. Nico was phenomenal. He had his moments where he was also, I'm like, just freaking speak to her. But for the most part, Nico is my favorite part of this book. I guess I would give it 3.5 stars. Next, I read Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed, and I listened to this on Anyplay as well. I listened to the first book on Anyplay. And that one, I feel like it took me a while to get into Heated Rivalry because one of the things that I prefer in my LGBTQ romances is I don't really love when the focus of the relationship or on the characters is that they feel shame towards their sexuality. And in the first chapter, we get kind of like a present day scene, and then we go back because this is a long-standing rivalry between the two heroes. They've been rivals for like the past 7 years. So we get the prologue in the present day where they're sleeping together, and he's still, one of the heroes is still feeling shame for being attracted to a man, and he's like, maybe I need to find a woman and like kind of be normal. And I hate reading about that because it makes me so sad, and it's just so devastating. It's not my preferred type of romance to read for MM romance. But the characters were so great. I really enjoyed this book a lot better than the first one. Ilya Rozanov is a Russian and he wants to be the best. And Shane Hollander and Ilya Rozanov, when they were drafted to the NHL, they were like the first and the second pick. So they're both kind of competing with each other on how many goals they get during the season and stuff. And every time they face off, it's this big thing. Like the media makes it a big thing. Like, oh, Rozanov and Hollander facing off against each other, number 1 and number 2 type of thing. But when they first got drafted to the NHL, they had a moment. They had a moment where Shane has only been with women and Ilya has experimented with men very secretly in Russia because it's very much outlawed. But the thing is, Shane he doesn't really inspect his sexuality too much after their first encounter. It's more like he was experimenting type of thing. Gradually, over the years, it becomes a habit to reconnect behind the scenes with Ilya Rozanov. And I feel like their romance was extremely beautiful. But this was a long book. I felt like it was very long. And I would say that, especially for Shane's acceptance of his sexuality was very drawn out. He didn't really settle into the reality of his sexuality until towards the very end, and I felt like the book could have been tightened up and shortened a lot. There was a lot of internal monologue that was just kind of recycled thoughts about himself and his sexuality and his attraction to Ilya that could have been cut out because we've explored it already. I did give this book 4.5 stars because I did like it a lot better than the first one, but also I feel like the ending almost felt, I don't want to say anticlimactic, but I felt like it wasn't quite resolved. It was resolved. They're completely together. But their relationship is still sort of a secret by the end, which makes me sad. So anyway, next I reread Night Reigns by Diane Duvall, and this is the second book in the Immortal Guardians. I almost said Immortals After Dark. Immortal Guardians series. I read the series a long time ago. I was actually looking it up. I think I picked it up first in 2012 or something. And this series is very similar to Sherilyn Kenyon's Dark Hunter series, where they have these vampire creatures, and in Immortal Guardians they're vampires, and it's like a virus that makes them that way, and eventually they kind of go crazy and insane. And so they have the Immortal Guardians, who when they were human they were just kind of gifted people with some powers, somebody could see ghosts, somebody was a little bit psychic or telepathic or whatever, and when they contracted the virus they became Immortal Guardians, so their minds don't deteriorate, they can handle the virus. Their job is to track down these rogue vampires and kill them, because all they do is prey on humans and recruit more vampires, and it's a bloodbath if they're not taken care of. They also have a leader of the Immortal Guardians, Seth, who's very similar to Acheron if you read the Sherilyn Kenyon series. I really enjoyed it. It's different, but there's enough similarities that it's aha. If you like Dark Hunters, you'll probably like Immortal Guardians. But what's interesting about the second book in the series is Amy. She is special, and we find out definitely what exactly is going on with her, what her gifts are and why she has those gifts and stuff. And Marcus is this loner, and I love how all the Immortal Guardians are these surly loners, and they're all vegan or vegetarian, because I like how it's explained. Their enhanced abilities makes them taste like all of the man-made chemicals that go into processed food, and so they just eat vegan and vegetarian and stuff, and they're very environmentally conscious, and it's very interesting. I thought that it was a very unique thing to include for paranormal romance. And Marcus is a tad bit depressed, so Seth, the leader, thinks that he needs a second. And most Immortal Guardians have a second, a human that is a part of their world and helps them make sure that they have enough bagged blood to survive on, and helps them whenever they're injured and stuff like that. Keeps their weapons sharp. And Amy kind of stumbles across Marcus when he's in the middle of this fight with these vampires, and she holds her own. There's some very instant attraction with them, but it's not insta love at all. I love how Marcus is just I don't want a second. I don't want her to be in my house. And she's just you have me, buddy. I'm not gonna leave you. And I love how Amy just kind of worms her way into Marcus's heart. It's beautiful. I don't even think I mentioned this. I reread this for the podcast because we recorded an episode, and this is the first time that Juliet read Night Rain, or any book in this series. So it was really fun to discuss this and dissect it. I think that this book holds up pretty well as a standalone. One thing, and I think that it's pretty classic of paranormals and urban fantasies that were written during this time, there are a lot of characters to keep track of. I will definitely give you that. And it was a lot easier because I've already read this series. It might be a little bit hard to get into at first, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed my reread. Then I read Beast by Misha Stone, and this is the first book in the Ever After series, and I think that all of the books are going to be mafia in this series, and they're all fairy tale retellings. Of course, the first one, Beast, is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. There is Tower, which is a Rapunzel retelling, and then Hound, maybe? That is a Fox and the Hound retelling, and this is the one that I want to get to. I want to get to the Fox and the Hound retelling so badly, because that movie fucked me up as a child, and I'm just like, this could be such a great mafia romance. I don't know how we're going to incorporate that story, but I'm very, very, very intrigued. But anyway, let's talk about Beast. So Ellie, the heroine, her dad owns this cafe, but he has a gambling problem, and so he kind of gets in deep. He owes money to people, and one day these guys show up to take her father and say that he's going to have to pay the debt one way or the other. So Ellie is like, oh no, I have to figure out who took my dad. I have to bail him out yet again. She finds out that this guy named Ashland has taken her dad, and this guy's reputation is not so great. She actually has a friend that works with her in the cafe and was like, you don't want to be messing with this guy Ashland. But she ignores all that advice, goes there anyway, and basically trades her life in for her father's and be like, I will take his punishment. I will stay at your house. And he was like, do you know what this means? And there's a very, very intimate scene where he's basically like, I expect sexual favors from you if you're going to trade places with your dad. And she accepts, knowing it. She could have backed out before because he made very clear what he expects of her, but she says, no, I'm going to stay anyway. This book has a lot of like BDSM elements where Ashland is trying to dominate Ellie, and she is fighting against being dominated. Obviously, it's not like a natural thing for her to just kind of like accept this type of treatment. But I really did end up by liking Ash. There were some pretty hot scenes in there. It's very spicy, but there were a few cliche things that were happening in this book. So I only gave it like 3.75 stars, which I'll round up to a 4-star for my official rating. Then I read The Ruler by Elin Peer, and this is the second book in the Men of the North series. The hero is actually the leader of the Northmen, Khan, and also I didn't mention with the Protector, but all of the men in the Northlands are named after like conquerors and like gods of old and stuff like that. So Khan is named for Genghis Khan, and the heroine Pearl is actually like a council member in the Motherlands. Now Pearl has kind of an ulterior motive to being in the Northlands and kind of working with Northmen and with Khan. And I don't want to give away too much because a lot of the setup for this book happens in the Protector. So you definitely have to read the Protector before you read the Ruler. But the thing about the Motherlands and the Northmen, they need one another for resources. They have these trade deals in place because they are reliant on each other. And Pearl basically wants to incorporate the Northmen into the Motherlands, but she very much expects them to adopt their way of life. And then Khan is like, we want women. We want women to marry. We want women to procreate. And I think I can convince Pearl to come to our side and adopt our way of thinking. So it's like both of them are hoping that the other will be swayed to their side. They're both very like dominant kind of personalities. I really like this romance. It was a lot more interesting. I think that the dynamics were a lot more interesting in the Rulers. So I liked it just a tad bit more than I liked the Protector. I'm going to give this book 4.5 stars. There's also a side character, Magni, and something happened in the first book that's kind of like the story is continuing. And I looked up and Magni's book's not until like book 5. And I'm like, I'm going to be continuing reading until I get to his book because it's very interesting. I was actually hoping that I would be able to finish Then Came You by Lisa Kleypas. This is a reread for me because the live show is tonight for the Historical Hellions, and I'm not done with it yet though, so I'm not going to be counting it in this weekly wrap-up, but this is the book that I'm currently reading. And the funny part is I was like, I remember nothing from this book. But when I opened it and I read the first scene, I was like, oh wait, it all came back. Like, that beginning scene is a very memorable scene. And I was just like, for some reason I wasn't associating it with this book, with Then Came You by Lisa Kleypas. For some reason I wasn't associating this scene that I remembered with a Lisa Kleypas book. So I'm enjoying my reread, and I'll be reviewing that next week. Also, I'm currently editing my Get Ready With Me makeup and 4K Q&A video. It's a long one. I had 2 hours of footage. This was the second time that I filmed this video, and it still came out really long. And I apologize, it's just going to be a really long video. I go off on tangents. It's hard to juggle questions plus doing my makeup, so this video was a lot longer than I expected it to be, but I'm not redoing it. I'm going to just put it out there. I also have to film an intro because I totally forgot to film an intro for that video. That's my plans today. Continue editing footage and also continue reading Then Came You by Lisa Kleypas. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with little HEA. Bye guys!